In my experience, the product data is always dealt with last. It's something that quite often when new products are launched or businesses are looking to actively market their portfolio, they omit the data or the data requirements.
I think the manufacturers have the data somewhere, but it's siloed. It's Harry will have the images on the hard drive in one place, Bob will have it in the other, but it's not all brought together.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Metpro Insights, a show dedicated to the construction industry. Today we're talking all about product data. Why is it important? What is a PIM? What's the contractor perspective on this? What is the golden thread? And a lot more. And to help us unpack this very important topic, we have three fantastic guests here today. First up is Suzanne Adgar, Director of NG15. Hello, Suzanne.
Good morning.
Suzanne, we always like to do this before we get into the conversation. If you can give people listening a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do.
Yes, I'm Suzanne Adgar and I'm the Managing Director for NG15. And I look after both sides of our business. I look after promotion of the growth of ePIM, our product information management system, and also our digital side of the business, where we help customers with digital catalogue and lots of other marketing projects.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Next we have Sean Cranston, Managing Director of NG15. Hello, Sean.
I've changed my title.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm now CEO and founder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
very elaborate.
We have a new managing director. So yeah.
Right.
My name's Sean Cranston. I'm CEO and founder of ePIM. Basically, my role has been working on ePIM for the last 12 years. It was originally designed as an in-house system for ourselves, but what we did is we decided to launch it as a product, and that we did that in 2017. NG15 is a 30-year-old business in 2 years' time, so we've been around a long time. And ironically, our other guest, which you're going to introduce shortly, I used to work for NG Bayliss as an apprentice and an electrical contractor.
Right. So
basically, the things that we're going to talk about today is I've actually screwed them to a wall and wired them up at some point in my life. So yeah, that's what I do. So basically, my role is talking to customers and developing ePIM.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And finally, we have Phil Thompson from the contractor perspective. And Phil, I understand recently there's been a chat. You were formerly of NG Bailey.
That's correct.
Yeah. So over to you.
Yeah, so I did 34 years at NG Bailey, sort of man and boy. I started a little bit after Sean, so he's got a bit more pedigree than I have. But my role within that organisation was involving the right from grassroots, as Sean mentioned, putting the products on the wall, doing project engineering, and then in the last 6-7 years was heavily involved in product data, working with the supply chain, looking at the changes that are coming through with the Building Safety Act. So now, since leaving that organisation, I've set myself up on my own, and my business is Information Management Squared, and I'm looking to support the supply chain, the contractors on their digital journey.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, it goes without saying, we're really grateful to have you here today. As you know, we're talking about product data. And the first, to get us started, the first question is a bit of an obvious one, but we all know that product data is incredibly important throughout the supply chain, but it's often overlooked or in many cases neglected. I think I know the answer to this, but would you agree with this? I think we'll start with you, Phil, from a contractor perspective.
Definitely.
Okay.
In my experience, the product data is always dealt with last. It's something that quite often when new products are launched or businesses are looking to actively market their portfolio, they omit the data or the data requirements. So as an example, with it in a previous life, we may have been looking to engage a new manufacturer, have a new agreement in place where we'd be looking to purchase a range of products from a manufacturer. Say for examples, electrical containment systems. That agreement would be brought online on a particular date, but quite often the data requirements wouldn't be in place in order to actually process the transaction. So the point of having the structured data would be to allow engineers, supervisors, etc., to select the items, to define what they want in terms of the to allow the supply chain to deliver it. But if that structured data just isn't there, it's not been validated and it's not available to select from, then you're on the back foot straight away.
Right. Okay. And what's the knock-on effects of that then? Does that just is it just massive? I'm guessing there's financial implications in there.
Yeah, many issues arise from it. Obviously, the biggest one is the fact that you can't have a defined price file, because if you don't define the what, you can't define the how much. So without that information being in place, then you're always playing catch up. So if you want to process an order from a requisition through to purchase order, what piece of information do you actually use? And then at that point, then you may rely on someone to use some sort of free text description, or they might just be doing it in a more analog way, over the phone. Can you send me 10 lengths of X, Y, Z? And if that product isn't defined, then that information just then gets translated and becomes Chinese whispers.
Okay. And the data that you do receive, or you would have received, would that meet your expectations, or would it fall short?
I would say it would depend on the manufacturer. Some manufacturers are really good if they're working with a PIN provider. If they have an in-house department to deal with the data, then it could be really good. But generally, my experience is that the data would be poor.
Okay. And Sean, NG15, you guys seem to be quite pioneering in this area.
Yeah.
So how are you trying to address this?
I think from our perspective, the whole data issue is a problem in the supply chain currently. There's no real sort of connection. Any manufacturer that we talk to in the first stages, their quality of product data is, as Phil says, is potentially poor. I think the manufacturers have the data somewhere, but it's siloed. It's Harry will have the images on the hard drive in one place, Bob will have it in the other, but it's not all brought together. But the quality of the technical product data, and it needs to be accurate, because it affects the customer experience, doesn't it? If I'm a customer looking at data and it's wrong, I can't make that buying decision. I can't make that purchasing decision. So as a PIN provider, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create, and there's a saying, we call it the central source of truth.
Yeah.
We're trying to create one place where then you can manage it in one place and you can feed it outwards to the supply chain. So that's really what our focus is, because it just improves customer experiences. So the problems that Phil's experience, we fix that because now he gets up to date. And I think the other key thing as well, and we've been doing a lot of webinars on it, is the connection between the manufacturer and the customer.
Yeah.
There's no connection. If you go to other industries like the car industry, your data is available for everything. But in our industry, there's no connection. So the manufacturer sends a spreadsheet out, and then all of a sudden is amended it. So it's now out of date. It's like data sheets, so they're out of date. So what we're aiming to do is connect the two together. So it's called syndicated of data. So if the manufacturer updates it, the customer receives it.
Okay. And why do you think that there is this disparity? Is that the right word? Probably apathy is better.
Apathy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that is? I mean, you could reverberate this back to me, to be fair.
Well, I mean, you guys have got on board with it, and you recognise it. I don't know why there's an apathy, because it's like going into a car showroom and saying, well, we're not going to tell you what the size of the engine is, but this is a nice looking car, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But if you look out there, on web platforms, on the data pools that we have out there, it's just all incomplete. I don't know why there's an apathy. Maybe prior to COVID, maybe there wasn't such a sort of need, if you like. But now where COVID has driven us into a more online presence, maybe that's now walking people up a little bit. But I don't know why there's an apathy. I don't really know. Do you feel?
Yeah. You can describe it as apathy, but I think if you analyse who the manufacturers perceive their customers to be, because ultimately they may be focusing on architects, end clients, etc., and they may be trying to sell their products to that ultimate client. But within the contracts and industry, construction, there is a number of different supply chains and actors that you need to then be collaborating with. So obviously the contractor, their task is to take the product and install it for the client. So if you're a manufacturer and you have products and you're pushing them through your marketing channels, you may be pushing that information from a kind of aesthetics perspective, or you might be showing the information in a glossy brochure. It doesn't necessarily need to be data led, because that information is you're trying to sell the product to the end client to place an order. But when you're the contractor, you're looking at more granular information around the product. So if you just take something around the pricing of the products, if it's a linear item, it needs to know. We need to know how is that product priced and the actual length of the product. We get electrical items in 3 and 6 meter lengths. Mechanical items come in 1, 2, 3, 3.2, 6.4, depending on the product. So there's a number of different variables that are not really addressed, and the problem is that the manufacturers don't perhaps understand the requirements of each actor within the supply chain.
Okay, fair point. And we've gone on this journey with you, Sean, and Suzanne with NG15, because as you said earlier, we recognise how important this is, and it is, and we've still got information that's in different silos, and we're trying to harmonise that now through our EPIM. But is these issues that Phil's raising here, are they addressed as people are taking on this journey?
Yeah, some of it is. I mean, the PIM is really about the technical side of it, not the aesthetics.
Yeah.
I mean, we are introducing what we call like free text and free pages, where you can add sort of the other information, the marketing information for a product. We are introducing fields to do that, but prominently at this moment in time, it's about technical information. It's about the technical aspects of the product. It's about and also the assets as well, because if you're working in lighting, you've got energy labels, you've got LDT files, there's a whole host of things that are attached visually to the actual technical data itself. So it's about bringing it all together. But I think as a PIM provider, I think it's an ever-moving platform, because there's no one way of doing it. You've just got to listen to your customers, listen to the people, the manufacturers that we work for, and they come up with some really great ideas. So what we're doing now at the moment, we're looking at, for lighting companies, we're looking at integrating Relux information and the global lighting data files that are now available. So we're looking at integrating it, because it's just more information where people can provide it in different formats. So we have an element of EPIM. If you're selling it to France, we introduced the e-commerce platform, Fabdis.
Right.
That's already built in. So we can build these things in as customers require them. And that includes the aesthetic part of things, the what I call the glossy marketing, as well as the technical side. So it's an ever-evolving platform.
And there's a real encouragement there, from what I'm hearing, of collaboration across the industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the industry's waking up. They're waking up to the fact that it just makes it easier if you've got it all in one place. It makes it easier to manage and feed out. But when you silo your information, it's more difficult to manage, because you don't know, what the guy next to you is doing. Yeah. So all in one place is definitely the best way to go.
And it makes a big difference to manufacturers' sales.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't mention any names, but one of our clients has already won 2 brand new contracts purely based on the improvements, the data they put in place. So it's a winning situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there's a bit of it's a bit head in the sand, because you've got this information all over the place, and I can speak from personal experience that this is not. I mean, Sean, you probably disagree, but it's not a fun task to go through and bring all your data into one place. It is laborious, but man, when you get past that, it's so worth it. It's really quite liberating.
I think COVID highlighted it all, really, because for me, I was standing up in front of 80 people in a room in 2019 talking about this, and they were all looking at me with blank faces and tapping on the phones, thinking, what is he, an alien? What's he on about? What's product data? We don't know anything. But now those same people have come back. Oh yeah, you were talking about product data. You were talking how important. And now we realise, because we need an online platform. But obviously, without data and product information, you can't create an online platform.
Yeah.
So they're coming back. But then you get the reverse problem. That's the consumption end. Then you go to the manufacturers and they're not creating it. So it's about bringing it together. It's about, once again, go back to what I said earlier, that syndication model, that end-to-end
Yeah.
solution. That's what needs to happen. And if the whole industry got on board with that, and we had manufacturers creating it, customers consuming it, it would just make everybody's life so much easier. And all the things that Phil highlighted would just be solved because it's there. And more importantly, it's maintained.
Yeah.
And it's nuanced as well in terms of, again, what each person or each element of the supply chain require. Because if you're a contractor, you might be interested in some of the, like you said, Jake, some of the dull things, like, for instance, it's a wiring accessory, does it have backed out terminals? Because that makes a difference to your installation and it can affect your productivity. Whereas, again, if you're an end client, you're looking at the more kind of glossy side, the aesthetics of it. But understanding the data requirements for each element of the supply chain and how those are used. I mean, estimation systems, again, that are used in the contracting space, they have their own set of requirements, but which are not relevant to perhaps an end client. But if they're not built to support the contractors or the platforms that are available in the marketplace, then again, the data is not going to work. Yeah.
I mean, I think, like, I haven't been in this industry for too long. It's been nearly 7 years now. But and I said this on the last episode that we did when we had Maria Coulter on, and I don't think people, from what I've seen, people in our industry at each level of the supply chain don't talk enough. It all feels a little bit disjointed. We hear a lot. I know there's a lot of external factors that have caused delays in construction projects and everything, but we don't seem to be getting together as an industry enough to streamline all this. I mean, you've got other software like BIM that's sitting out there that I don't know what your opinions on BIM are, but I'm getting a bit off topic now.
Well, I mean, BIM crops up, doesn't it? It crops up a lot. But once again, it's data driven.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of having more, but then you need the models, obviously, to represent the data. But there's typically a manufacturer going down there alone finds it's an expensive journey.
Yeah.
So they may avoid it. There are some what we call like generic models, isn't there? Like you can get generic models, but they're not always the best thing. You know a little bit more about BIM, don't you? I think.
Yeah,
it's not really my topic.
The problem, the whole BIM agenda, in the contractor space, a lot of people are quite wary about the information that's provided. When there was a requirement that the government set a number of years ago now around to reach the different levels of BIM, and a lot of manufacturers invested heavily in having their product data available. In many cases, that product data was overwhelming. It couldn't be used in models. So, as an example, a very kind of mundane products which you will require to add to a model, the information relating to those products was too big. So, for instance, it might include the radius of a particular of an edge of a wiring accessory, for example. But when you start to put all those information into the model and you get multiple instances, it just overloads the model, and then the model, the system struggles to open it, especially if it's maybe cloud-based and they're struggling with the infrastructure at a site level, which a lot of sites do. So you've got this kind of disparity between what the model's trying to achieve, but the reality of actually trying to make it work.
Right.
So the BIM itself, some people got their fingers burned with the investment of BIM, and I think that's made them wary about this whole product data journey.
Okay. Well, why don't we get into what exactly we need to do? So if we start, Sean, I'm going to come back to you for this one. So we've mentioned this acronym PIM several times now. What is PIM or a PIM, and why is it important for businesses to implement them?
Product Information Management, sometimes called MDM, Master Data Management.
Okay.
Sometimes referred to as that. But basically, it allows any company, and a PIM, not just in R&D, a PIM can be used in retail, it can be used, and is used constantly in retail. Basically, it's a place to put all your information into one system that's managed by all. The key thing to that, though, is that it's collected, it's managed. You can create channels and feeds from a PIM. So you can a typical channel would be your website. So once you've got all your information, all your assets in one place, you can feed your website. So you can create marketing channels. I mean, eBay, Amazon, they're all channels.
Yeah.
You could also feed them. So gathering all the information in one place, maintaining it, keeping it accurate, making sure that everything's up to date, and also allowing your customers to consume that data. That's basically what the PIM does as a product in its entirety, really.
Okay. So for people who are just starting their PIM journey, what would be your initial recommendations?
Well, the first thing is a data audit.
Right.
Where are you today? So we'll get some good results from that. They'll say, well, we've got a spreadsheet. I mean, my attitude to spreadsheets are they were designed for your accountant to do your tax return. They were never designed to store data. But the whole world's adopted them. Now, we come across customers that, well, I've got 20 PDFs that I fax out to my customers. And seriously, we still have a customer that does that.
Yeah.
So it's a data audit. Let's find out where their information is, and we start to bring it together. We start to normalize the data to make sure that it's it's readable. Because the little things like when you have, say, length, they'll put length 20 millimeters. Well, in actual fact, it should be length millimeters 20. It's called normalization of data. So we work through all of that. So we basically bring it in line so that it's usable on sort of most platforms when it goes out there. But the main thing is data audit, bring it all together, get all the information in, and then we'll see. And then we'll start to add things like taxonomy, so we can start to categorize it for them, and we'll start to bring it, and then we'll do audits in other areas, what they've got, and basically bring it into one central source of truth.
Okay. And you've mentioned syndication a few times
Yeah.
through this discussion, which is a big thing.
It's a biggie, yeah.
Yeah, and that was what really got certainly me excited, because I was the one that was having to send the spreadsheet over to Luckins all the time, which was
yeah. I mean, the syndication model that we've done with Luckins is really about keeping everybody up to date. So the basics of it is that if you're a manufacturer and you're connected to that Luckins syndication service that we work with, and the wholesaler, say, downloads that information on this side and he puts it on his website, it's now connected right back through the chain to the manufacturer. So let's say manufacturer spots a mistake. Oh, the IP rating's wrong. So what he does, he amends it, and then he presses his button and it feeds all the way through. So in actual fact, the wholesaler's website gets updated.
Yeah.
Because and it does say in the system, you've had a Luckins update and it's a remote update. So what you're doing there is you're making that connection. And to be honest with you, and that's not just also, that can be through to contracting apps and estimating systems. It can be the whole hog on the other end. And without syndication, to be honest with you, a PIM system really is just managing data. What we're trying to do is expand that. And we'll say, yeah, have a PIM system, but let's connect it as well.
Yeah.
Let's have the connection side.
It's just another silo without the syndication.
Yeah, without the syndication, it's just another silo. Absolutely. So we've recognised that. So we're driving this syndication model, and we have quite a lot of manufacturers already working on it, and we've got some more initiatives coming out this year which are going to expand upon that, because we just need to link the industry in that sense.
Have you felt positive? This is something I was going to ask later on, but because you've mentioned you've got a number of manufacturers on there now, do you feel more positive about things as in the current state of play, or is there still a long way to go?
They're slow.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know whether you are. But they are.
Also, there's a lot of obstacles that get in the way. We were talking about this at the beginning, and one of the things that we find is when we ring manufacturers to talk to them about their data, they'll say, I'm doing my website, I'll come back to PIM later. And that isn't really the way to do it. It's the wrong way around. And only this week I've had this example, and I really think if they just take one step back and try to walk before they run, get their data sorted out, and then they can feed their channels, including their website. Otherwise, they're sat there doing it manually. Yeah. And that's still adding to the problem. You're still inconsistent with your data.
Yeah. Oh, I can attest to that as well.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, there are a lot of people, as Susan says, doing the website first and then doing the product data after. It's like wrong way around.
I've come across many examples like that. Like Suzanne says, the way to do it would be to first of all to have your data, and then your website is in essence a channel, one of many that you output your information, you display that to your customers, etc. But the adoption of the PIM, I do fully support those. But a lot of manufacturers, in my experience, what they're doing is they may be having somebody working on the PIM over here. Well, then their sales team will still be providing their data templates or spreadsheets to their customers. And it's important that the manufacturers recognise the things they need to stop doing. Because if they're going to have a PIM system and invest in structured data and have some trust around that, then it's no point undermining that by having another department in your organisation sending out information which conflicts with that information that you're trying to support through your PIM.
Yeah, and you also need collaboration between your web company, whoever you're dealing with, and the PIM provider. Yeah. That's very important, because we also work with manufacturers who have websites, and the providers of those websites want to charge an arm and a leg for bringing in an API connection, which is just ludicrous. So you need to establish that relationship if you're going to, launch a new website to start with, and always put PIM first.
I'm picking up Phil's point about spec sheets. I mean, we were the first to bring out what we call a dynamic data sheet. We won an award for it at the Electrical Wholesalers Awards as the best industry initiative. What that basically does is it takes that manufacturer data, and the sales guys can produce spec sheets directly from it. But there are no spec sheets. There isn't another department. They just hit a button, and it's produced by the data that's available today. The problem is that you go on a lot of manufacturer websites, they've got spec sheets that are from 10 years old. Yeah. And I was talking to one yesterday they've just spent the last year doing spec sheets for their entire product range in Word, and then creating PDFs. Yeah. And then I've made a revelation, well, you can scrap all of that now, because we're just going to do it dynamically. So you do your data, and the data sheets will produce themselves.
I also think there's mis-selling around data sheets, because sometimes it's a term that's just banded around the industry. Send me your data sheet, but there's data sheets and there's data sheets. Some is on one page and it just has the dimensions on there and very little else. As a contractor, in my experience, the data sheets that we would always be trying to draw in would be the sheets that have got like the test data on there, the accreditations on it, something of more substance that demonstrates that the product has integrity.
Yeah. So it's almost like the data sheets that you were receiving or currently are being produced were, what's the best way of putting it? It was just
technical data sheets, aren't they?
Yeah,
they need to be labelled in a particular way in order that people know what they're getting. Because sometimes people might say, "Oh, well, there's my data sheet. Here's a link to my website. I'll send it over on email." But when you get it, it doesn't do the data sheet justice.
Okay. I mean, a lot of stuff you've been talking about there is very relatable. Certainly, data sheets that are perhaps out of date on company websites, and start with the data first. That's where we've got our PIM with you guys, and at the moment it's being used. We've had a couple of customers come to us, and the NG15 team have been brilliant. Certainly take a load of work off us, but there's always more we can be doing, and we're now in the early stages of a new website, and it's all being driven by this. We're trying to do it the right way around.
But you can also add other things to data sheets, like there's other information like installation instructions, certificates of conformity. There's a whole list of what I call assets you can add to the PIM. We've got one client that generates, so the text on his certificate of conformity, the actual text is actually as data. So basically, when they produce that, it brings those elements into the sheet as well. So they can add. Basically, we can create any document, providing it's in the data. So the information is in the data. We can create a document. Yeah. It's just an HTML page created as a PDF. So it's not hard to do. So we can expand upon it. It doesn't just have to be technical data. We can start. One of the things in the PIM we've done is we've split it up now. So we've got technical data, we've got marketing data, we've got packaging data. We could have Relux data. We could have. It doesn't really matter. They're just fields, and then we can take that information, which is maintained, and we can create, quite comprehensive documents if we want to.
Yeah. And you can create new fields as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
You guys are so flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, we've asked for I think 2 or 3 new fields to be dropped in that just make sense to us.
It's the one thing about ePIM since we've been working on it that we've sort of run out of ideas, really. And what we listen to the manufacturers, because that's where it all starts. And we say that they want this field, they'd like this bit, they'd like, this would work great. It's like the relux thing I mentioned. It's just that we happen to be talking to a lighting company and they want those elements in. And it sounds like a good idea. We do have a lot of lighting companies on board with EPIM. So from that perspective, it's something we'll do because it's great for the customer. So the customers are now starting, it's like the manufacturers are to drive what EPIM looks like rather than us, because you can only build a PIM to a certain point, and then it has to be customer driven and industry led. Yeah, absolutely. It has to be.
Well, that's the holy grail, isn't it? Because you get an investment from us as the manufacturer, and if we're forming and shaping it, working with contractors as well, all of a sudden you get this true harmony. I'm trying to sound a bit prophetic, sorry, but
no, that's the essence of collaboration, though, isn't it? Is that understanding what each person requires, and to come back to what we said at the beginning, it's just that core data. Is it there? Does it represent the product? Has it got sufficient baseline information in there for each actor within the supply chain to be able to use?
Talking about the data itself, then, because we've talked a lot there about data sheets and missing information. How does the quality of technical data impact the supply chain and the overall customer experience, would you say?
I think high quality product data helps reduce errors. It also creates sales, because if the information is readily available, then you can make a buying decision. But if you're missing information, which you often are, then you can't. It's hard. But you imagine a contractor looking at the information and say, well, I've got a picture and a description, but I've got nothing else. Yeah. But from this manufacturer, I've got all the information I need to make a decision or put into my quote. I've got it. It's available. So there's other things like, high quality data, data governance. I've got some things on my notes here. Data validation, cleansing processes, regular data quality audit. These are all things the manufacturer needs to do. They need to take responsibility. There's a saying in the industry about manufacturer owning their data, and it should be. We're only at the end of the day, we're providing systems to deliver. Yeah. We're not the owners of the data. You guys are the owners of the data, and things like when you're doing e-commerce, if somebody's making a decision on accurate data, then there's less returns. You're not going to get returns. But if the product comes and it's wrong, then because returns cause problems, you can't sell it on as new, so there's value in all of that. So it's about the manufacturer taking responsibility, but there are some rules that they have to follow. It's not, and it is a bit slapdash at times. It's not always done.
Just on the points you raised on data quality as well, my take on it is always that there was data quality, and then there was data for product quality. And what I mean by that is that my approach was always that I wanted to have access to all data. That includes the products that, as a contractor, we want to avoid. So if you had a white list and a black list for products, you'd want to make sure that the items on that was fully populated, so that that you can procure those items and that they fit with your agreements and they've got some integrity around them. But also, if there's products which you want to avoid that don't have the quality elements and they don't have the integrity, but without the data for them, you can't control that. You can't ring fence them. So it's important that everybody recognises, in my opinion, that you need data for everything, not just the things that you're going to procure or transact. You need it for everything, so you can separate them.
We seem quite a reactionary industry.
Sorry, what was that?
We seem quite reactionary. We don't seem
absolutely
proactive. Again, like I said, I'm talking with absolutely with lesser experience. But would you? Who should we be looking to? What sectors or industries should we be looking to learn from?
I don't know whether there is another comparative industry, is there really?
It's I don't think there's no one industry that's kind of nailed it, but I think if you're gonna look to take some guidance in, it would be probably the retail industry. But they are not without their own issues, but at least they have got a more collaborative approach to the adoption of data.
And move the conversation on a bit now. What are some emerging trends, technologies in the PIM space that businesses should be aware of?
Emerging technologies. I don't think there's anything very specific because we haven't got the basics right yet. So let's get the basics right, and then we can move on. But I mean, there's all this talk of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, that's big at the moment. You know, Chat GPT and all of that. That's coming on. You know, we talk about. Phil has a fantastic word, don't you? It's called interoperability.
Interruptibility. That's right.
I can't even say it.
Yeah. No, yeah. Too early for that.
It's like machine learning,
Right.
data validation tools. They could come into in the PIM space. Automated cleansing processes, automated normalization of data, where we can take data and normalize it across that. Those things could be interested.
The data's got to be right.
It has, yeah.
Down that route, so.
I think that's the important thing regarding any new technologies coming is that we've got to be realistic about the fact that Sean said that get the basics right first. But if you don't get the basics right, if that information isn't there, then there's no point in adopting some fantastic piece of technology or a new platform.
Just because it's new.
Yeah, and then you actually compound your problems because then you're going to go down the road of having this complex, perhaps an ERP system, etc. But if you're going to have this, it's going to undermine that with poor data. You're going to get a garbage in, garbage out approach. So unless you get the information right in the first place, and I've seen examples of that, you know, in the previous lives where organisations are constantly wrestling with these platforms, and they invest a lot of money in them in the, you know, the view is oh well, this will improve our business processes and give us transparency, etc., etc. But some of the basics are not done. Then you end up with this long tail of problems to deal with.
And that's what we offer at NG15. You know, from a manufacturer's point of view, they might be struggling for, you know, the right amount of staff or the right kind of infrastructure to sit and actually look at product data. But what we can do at NG15 is we can support all of that. And we work very hard. We've got a team of data experts, including Sean sat here, that can take a good look at the data, analyse it, and then get it in ship-shape form.
Yeah, we all
can move it forward.
Right.
They're never alone.
We're not here to say that, you know, we're going to create all this amazing technology, but getting those basics right. If we can get all our manufacturer customers to get that bit right, then the other thing is that the nice have that's out there at the minute we can probably start to look at. But Phil is absolutely right. Without that core data being correct, then it's like Phil said, it's, you know, bad stuff in, bad stuff out.
Yeah. And also it's also worth noting as well that even an organisation like NG15, the work that they may do on the data and the governance and the working with the manufacturer. The key is as well is to recognise where the gaps are, and sometimes a manufacturer might deliver a data set to a PIM provider, and then that PIM provider might come along and say, yeah, we know we've done some work on it and it's all good to go. But if that only covers 98% of the items the manufacturer wants to sell, and I've come across examples of where people have given things the thumbs up, the green light, and said, yeah, it's all good, brilliant, all done, and I've said, are you sure? And then 3 months down the line, you find something's not there. And it's not that there's the data's incorrect. It's just that the line's missing. The information for that particular product hasn't even been included because somebody may perceive it to be unimportant or it's low sales. Yeah. But it doesn't matter how many of an item is sold. We still need the data within the industry in order to measure it.
I can understand from the manufacturer's perspective though, because it's the old 80-20 rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
20% of your products, 80% of your sales. So based on that fact, well, we'll just do really great data for our 20%, and the other 80% gets left. But Phil's absolutely right. You need a complete. Now, I think a manufacturer can start like that. They can say, well, let's get the important things out because we sell millions of pounds of this, and then we'll do them first. Yeah, but you've still got to do the others. You can't leave it. You've got to do. If a product's going out there into supply chain, it needs to have the good stuff with it. You can't just leave it. But you can structure it so that you're not doing it all in one go. Because like you said earlier, Jake, it's a big uphill to get it done in the first place. Yeah. But then it's a maintenance problem.
And some manufacturers generally don't know how many products they've got. The bigger you are as a manufacturer, the bigger your portfolio. There isn't probably anybody within any department that can actually say, you know, nail their colour mass and say, yeah, that is exactly how many products that we've got in our catalogue and our portfolio.
Well, just come into my head just now is one of the things we've done in EPIM is a component management tool, because obviously a lot of manufacturers bring things in to build. So we're talking about products here, aren't we? We're talking about the top level product that we're selling. But what about all the bits that make up that product sometimes? So what we've introduced in EPIM it's a bit like a BOM tool, a bill of materials tool. But what it does is basically allows you to bring in components and manage the next level down.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also important.
Yeah.
Especially for lighting companies, typically, because they bring in a lot of bits and pieces to build product. So we put that into EPIM already, and we have customers already using it for component management, because components also have technical data, core data, they have images, they have a whole host of things. So by adding that into EPIM, it gives what we call the next level down from your product you're selling to the bits that you're selling as well. And it can be used for spare parts and all that type of thing. But it's something we put in because we thought it was important.
And that's also important, again, from a contractor's perspective. So if you have damages or items go missing at site, you might not want to replace the whole product. You might just need a few components, some spares. So to be able to access information for the spares to replace certain items or to kind of reassemble it on site is really important. And also the other end of the spectrum, you've got then the off-site assembly. So you, as well as taking the product itself, you're adding those items into a sub-assembly that a contractor in many cases may be creating within their own factory environment and then deliver that to site. That then has its own set of data requirements.
Okay. I'm personally quite interested in the like I said earlier, we seem to be quite a reactive industry. We don't seem to be particularly proactive. In some some instances, I think we are. Certainly with things like this, I don't believe that we are. Do you think that people truly, that the industry knows how important this is at the manufacturer and possibly the wholesaler level as well?
I think two sides to the fence there. I'll just talk about the wholesaler. I don't think, I mean, the wholesalers have not really got to grip with the whole online sort of. There are key, I think the nationals have, that they have online presences a bit. I think the independent sector, which is probably about 35% of our entire market as far as electrical is concerned, I don't think they've all grasped it. They're all attempting it in their little ways. But to them, the trade counter is still important, and I totally agree. The trade counter, because the one thing you get from a trade counter is you get the experience, don't you? They might walk in and say, "Oh, I'm looking for something for this job, but I don't quite know what it is," and they get the advice. That's something you can't really get from a website as such. Is that personal sort of contact and touch. So I don't think they've totally grasped it. On the manufacturer side, I think it's the same. I think there's some have and some haven't. I mean, we probably looking at, there's probably around about 160 manufacturers, which is probably 80% of the marketplace, roughly, as a number. But you look at a lot of those, and they're nowhere near. I don't think they've grasped the whole importance of it at all. I think they're just. But it's sort of one of those things that we signed a new customer yesterday, but we've been talking to him for 2 years, and it's like, we realise now. We realise we should have done this 2 years ago.
Well, what was that? What led to that moment of realisation?
A new managing director who knew what he was doing.
Oh, okay.
So, but because he came from an environment that was data driven, and he come and said, "Well, why aren't we doing it? Well, this is ridiculous." Call NG15 because that's what he used previously. Right. But the thing is, it's that I think ultimately there'll be a tipping point, and they'll all just realise that it needs to be done. You can't buy a product without the correct information in anything. It's like going back to the car again. You need to know the engine size, the wheel size, what colour seats it's got. It's basic. It seems like basic stuff to me, but I don't know. I see so many products with no data, no information, and incorrect. And that's the other thing, because without syndication, there's always going to be errors.
What's it like on site, Phil? That's something else I'm interested in, because what Sean's saying there about it, it's going back to the car. And when you go and buy a car, it's typically a nice experience. The salesman brings you a nice coffee, and you can go and sit in the car. You can choose your seats and everything else. Perhaps we don't see that as important on site. We don't liken whether how many lugs a switch box has got compared to the size of a car engine. But what's it like on site? I'm not going to say you get excited about the number of lugs on a switch box, but are you really annoyed when that stuff isn't there?
It's safe to say that it's not without its complications on site, and the way the current supply chain set up within the construction sector, in my view, doesn't help. as an example, you still have M&E.
Yeah.
So, as a contractor, a lot of contractors are MEP. So they're looking for that full array of building services products. So what they're looking for is a solution where they go to a supply chain partner that can provide all those products. But the way it's set up at the moment, it's typically electrical and mechanical separately. And when they're providing linear products, you've got then 2 deliveries, 2 sets of vehicles coming to site, and that then creates a whole lot of complications around the client and sustainability, etc. So that needs to change. But in terms of the actual data regarding the products, your example on the box and the lugs is a good example. So I can recall an example where we had a requirement when I was in a previous life, when I was working for a contractor. We had a requirement for a single switch box which needed to have 2 25mm knockouts in a single face. Now there was only one brand on the market that actually provided that at the time. Otherwise, the products received they'd have to be drilled out or enlarged the holes. So that simple analysis and understanding of the product, if you don't get that right, if the data isn't related to the product, then what that results in is item being delivered to site, which is more productivity requirements, and additional tools, etc. And it's just frustrating for the operatives to have to pick a product up and then start to change it really to make it fit. So we did approach a manufacturer that had this particular product, and it was like pulling teeth trying to get them to provide the data for their in essence their back box to tell us, give us a drawing, for example, tell us what size holes they are in this particular face. And it took months and months and months just to get that information out of them to add value, so that we could then promote that product within our what we call best practice, so that could be used by the engineer, so that they would know the differences. It's like Sean said, just simple, making decisions on information. These products are pretty much the same price. And even if one was a little bit more expensive than the other, it's like no one would really care. But getting the right product in order to facilitate the installation, that was the important bit.
Yeah, but I think, how simple can it be? Tell me the number of knockouts and the size on a bike box. I mean, it's not exactly rocket science, is it? Yeah. But it's missing.
But you go and look for that level of information now within the supply chain. As it stands now, look at all the providers and look for that level of information. It's quite hard to find.
Okay, fair enough. It's just interesting because I'm trying to understand where we're lacking really, because as we're a manufacturer, we have to put our hands up. We haven't been as on the ball as we want to be, and it's part of the reason for this conversation. In fact, it's the driving reason for this conversation today. But I'm conscious that between manufacturers and contractors, you have the wholesaler as well. Now, whilst the responsibility is on the manufacturer for the data, do you think there's anything more that wholesalers can be doing?
Lots.
Yeah, they can. Well, they can start to consume the data when it's better available, because we offer a way for them to get any of the lookings data free of charge via the datasheet tool. And there's a lot of information on there, and it's growing all the time. As we get manufacturers, you guys are pushing direct now, and there are other pushing direct, so the data is constantly updated. So they need to engage with that tool, but I think that it's hard. It's hard to make them, because I think it's an ages thing as well. I'm not being so horrible here, but a lot of if you go to any of the sort of like buying group meetings, it's the older end. I had one guy, I'll not mention the wholesaler, and he said to me, "This internet thing won't last," because he's still getting it on bits of paper. Yeah. But he's like 82, but he's still. But what's going to happen is the younger generation are going to take over, and they're going to realise that, actually this is really important. This stuff's really important, and we've got to have it. So I think there's definitely an apathy with wholesalers. Not all. Some are on board. I mean, if you take the nationals, look at the CFs and Rexels. I mean, they've got great product data, on their sites. It's improving all the time, and they're making it available online and offline in the catalogs that they're producing. We do the Rexel catalog, and they've increased that now. They're driving more, because there's still a need for to sit in your van and choose some products or do whatever.
But so the wholesaler, as well as priding themselves on the service that they deliver, because they all pride themselves on their service.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
They need to also pride themselves on the data that they supply.
Yeah.
And that needs to go back to the manufacturer. So they need to demand that from the manufacturer. And then the manufacturer will,
But typically in the past, Suzanne, though, it's like the data's not available, and so they've got to phone up for it.
Yeah.
And that we live in a digital world. It's just like, just make it. It's not rocket science to make it available.
No.
Just manufacture, get it right, get the data correct. Also, it's available on tap. Yeah. That's what the syndication model is, and that's why it's so important. If we can get that element right, end to end, then that's where we'll have a win.
But the biggest issue, in my view, is that the silos, the disconnect, if you like. So you as a manufacturer, you're working hard to make your data, to improve your data, and then to push it out through the different channels. Have you ever checked? Have you ever followed your information through a journey and see how it ends up? Go into some of your supply chain partners, sit behind their desk at one of their terminals, and have a look at how your information is being used in their ERP system. In my experience, there's a lot of manipulation of the data and a lot of overriding of part numbers, which then results in substitution of products. And I think that the biggest issue there in the industry is that a lot of the supply chain partners, the merchants, they've got to step back from the way they've done it in the past, which is to create and ring fence their own data and protect that and drive everything through their own stock codes and start to adopt a more agnostic approach so that your information is then transparent. And also then, how do we ensure your information, as good as it may well be, is passed to the client if someone in the middle of it has manipulated it or changed it?
Okay. Well, I mean, that's one of the questions that we had down is following the is following our data through a transactional journey. And I can't say with any certainty that we've ever, as you suggested there, sat behind the portal at a customer and seen how it's delivered. But it's something that I'll absolutely be relaying to the sales team. Yeah. Absolutely.
I would urge all manufacturers to do that. In my view, is just to go, and just to understand, sit with, not necessarily go and talk to one of the buyers who's looking at an agreement and then signing off a contract, but sit with the salespeople who actually process it for the customers and see how the information works. How does it flow through the system? What piece of information is more important than another, and what is being changed? Because I think there's a real danger there that there's some substitution, or there's the level of ignorance around the products. You may have a product which is unique in the marketplace, but somebody on the supply chain might not have that knowledge or that training, and that might just be substituting that product. When I was working in the contract space, cable lugs was an area that we used to focus in upon, because that's an area where there's a lot of misunderstanding around the integrity of the product and matching it to the manufacturer data.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think we've certainly covered a lot. I think, we've been talking for about an hour or so, and what I'm taking away from it, the fundamental is manufacturers sort your data out in a nutshell. But one thing that has been that I was also keen to understand from you, Sean, or Suzanne, was your partnership with Trimble Lookins. This has been, I think I said this earlier on, the biggest benefit for me personally with working with NG15 is that I never have to do another spreadsheet for Lookins again. So how did that partnership come about?
It sort of by accident, really. We had manufacturer customers that were sending spreadsheets, basically, and they said, is there a better way to do it? So we first approached Lookins probably about 2.5 years ago, because Lookins have been around for 40, 50 years. Yeah. It's a long time. They are, they have a unique code it's called the TSI code, which is embedded in systems throughout the country. This is that connector bit, they're doing that. But they've predominantly been known for transactional data, which is the core data, as they call it, which is basically your invoice description, trade pricing, and the TSI code, which the industry's relied on to deliver those trade prices for years and still does today. But they also had another part of this was called Lookins Live, which was more than just transactional data. It was actually the anything from BIM files, 3D modeling objects, product data, data sheets, installation instructions, all these things. But I think that from a manufacturer perspective, that had been sort of left to one side because it was always the transactional data. But they do a lot more than that. They do a lot more. So what we thought is that our first objective was can we just send you information from our manufacturers? That was the first bit. But then we realized that the whole syndication model was really important, because if we could use what they were already connected to, we could get the manufacturers to get the data right. We could then create this syndication model, this end-to-end solution, leveraging what they'd already got, leveraging what we'd got, and allowing you guys to talk to your customers directly with product data. So that's how it all came about, and we've got a great partnership now, and we've got lots of manufacturers sending it, direct to look-ins, and it's processed, and we have some plans to increase that in the coming year.
Lovely. It's really encouraging. I mean, I think I've said a couple of times in the past hour or so that we don't seem to talk enough as an industry, and you've seemed to have kick-started that conversation digitally, which is really encouraging.
I think we should mention ETIM, to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, for ETIM, for me, European Technical Information Model, it's been around since the 90s, predominantly in the Benelux countries in the early days, Finland, brought in by the EDA in the UK. I think it has some legs, from my perspective, because it helps sort of nurture the sort of attribute and specifications, and they're more standardized. Because if you go to 20 lighting manufacturers and you just take something like beam angle, one will say beam angle degrees, one will say angle of beam, degrees of angle. I mean, they'll call it, they're probably 20 different names. Yeah. But in ETIM, there's one. And that does help.
Yeah.
So I think ETIM has a future, but I think it's more established in European countries because it's the European Technical Information Model, and the great thing is translatable as well. So if you're using part of it in the UK or in France, you can directly translate it to Spain because it's a global model. So I think that does have some legs for the future, and I think in the UK it's still at its embryonic stage. It's not really gaining traction yet.
Right.
There's different formattings, systems would have to be amended and everything else. But I think it's something that's on the horizon for me. We do have customers doing ETIM files today.
Yeah.
We've got quite large customers that actually we've got customers that only do ETIM, haven't we, Susan? I think.
We have.
Yeah.
And of course our PIM solution supports ETIM.
Yeah. We always support it, and I think it's important to continue to do so. It will start to become more important. What that time frame is, I've got no idea.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, I don't
because
know.
The only reason I was going to ask that was because I said earlier, this is to get all this from out of these different silos and put it into one central source of truth, as you said. It is a laborious task. You have to commit the time to doing it, and you have to really be dedicated. So I think because we're talking about getting our data out of these silos and into one place. Then you've got CCPI, the golden thread, ETIM. Do you feel like it's just maybe it's a bombardment of information?
It does get confusing. Yeah.
Yeah, the landscape is confusing, and just to pick on what Sean said there about ETIM, I agree. These things have a place, and it's gathering some momentum, but there's a danger with some of these sort of activities that they're upsell too much, and each one of them has a place within the sort of transactional journey. So if you're looking at a taxonomy system, a classification system, they're important when you come to product selections or product replacement. So maybe at the beginning, at the end of the journey, but once a product's already been pre-selected or determined against a given contract, then what you need is a unique identifier to identify that product unequivocally, that's the item that's going to be delivered to the client and installed in the building. The classification system becomes less prominent. So each one of them has to be kind of these initiatives and acronyms has to be understood and where they fit within the whole transactional journey. That's the important part for me.
What I would say as well is if you have confusion about all of these things, don't just sit there. Have a one-to-one with Sean or Phil and take that advice. That advice comes completely free, and we can help you to understand whereabouts you are in your journey and where you need to perhaps consider these things in a structured way. You don't need to do everything at once. You just need to start the journey somewhere.
I think just before we wrap up, I'd like to mention the unique identifier. because that is key. Now, in the UK currently, we have a unique identifier which is used by Lockheed. It's called the TSI code. It's been established for a long, long time. And I would say it's probably used by 80-90% of the industry, probably.
Yeah, the bulk of the industry has adopted it. But it was never intended to be that kind of that unique identifier in that sense. It does belong to Lookins. It's that you use it under license.
You do, yeah. But it is a unique. And now there's been talk about like GTIN and things being brought in, GS1 and all these other things. What's your thoughts on that? I'm not really, because I'm very focused on TSI. I mean, we do, in EPIM, we do store the GTIN code anyway. We've got a place for it, the barcode, you can put the number in there. Yeah. But is there room for two identifiers?
I'm quite passionate about this. The industry needs to agree the adoption of a unique identifier. For me, GS1 with their global offering and their set of standards are in pole position. They've got a solution that you can fit into construction. Things are never perfect, but it's certainly got some fantastic foundations, and is already adopted in other countries as well. If you want to make comparisons against, let's say, the TSI code, ultimately all these codes just sit in separate fields within a database. They're just system codes. The coin system, for example, that can adopt the Lookins codes, the TSI code. But really, it's more of a philosophical agreement that the industry needs to get behind, not specifically driven by a system. Everybody needs to agree that they're going to adopt a given code, and that's not only communicated via machine. Through sort of whether it's through some sort of SQL database or whether it's into an ERP system, but it's about physically being able to human read it as well and recognise that that is the unique identifier. That's the code that I can pass to every single person within the supply chain, and also could be then maybe scanned as well to receipt the goods and to evidence it. Put it on a barcode. Physically trace it within a building, etc. There's got to be a more kind of, like, say, philosophical agreement first and foremost. Yeah,
I feel it's almost. I say almost. It's practically inevitable that that's the way we're going to end up in any case. With barcode scanning and everything, like Amazon's pioneered the way for everybody, but it's going to happen.
I think in any data format, ultimately, it has to be machine readable. It's got to be, going forward. I mean, there's all these things that you can read online about the digital product passports and all these things that are coming out. But if you look at what they're saying that it's got to be machine readable. Yeah. It's got to be something that you can scan, a computer can scan and take, because that's what digital is. We shouldn't be handwriting numbers. We should be saying beep, beep.
Yeah. It has to be, like, say, digital. But the adoption of a code like the GTIN, it's their sort of most basic code allows you to allocate. It's just a number against a given product, and that then allows you to recognise that item. And if you look at what the retailers do, as we all know when we do our shopping, we use those codes all the time. But as well as that, the GTIN or the standards allow you to have batching and serialization codes. So you can have a specific code which relates to one individual product, which again is important as we put more complex products into buildings to recognise that in that instance it's that given item. And there's also then a GLN as well, which will give you the location reference as well for that product. So you can tie all these things together, and you then can truly start to build this model of information against, that is the product that we installed in the building, that's its location, here's the maintenance history for it, etc.
But I think that because the TSI code is already established in lots of systems, the GTIN code could just be attached next to it in another field.
Yeah.
It's just another field. It doesn't need to be replaced. It just needs to.
Yeah.
But if we adopt it and say that, because it's more difficult to alter multiple systems than it is to just add another field.
So you'd have the GTIN could potentially be almost an alias code to the TSI code.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But the key thing is for people to recognise which is the primary key. Right. Because you could have 20, 30 different identifiers. I mean, when you add an item to an ERP system, it will give it its own stock reference, its own unique code anyway within the database. But that's not necessarily drawn out and used in a transaction. But the GTIN really needs to be, in my opinion, the one that the industry adopts as the unique identifier.
Well, that's an interesting point to raise, because again, going back to the talking across all levels of the supply chain in the construction industry, that seems to be, a nice driver for everybody to get together. But how do we do that? How do we get everybody in that philosophical sense behind one identifier?
There is a within GS1. There is a construction. I can't think of the word now. I should do because I'm the co-chair. But I'm trying to think of the word for it. But basically, we have these meetings where we bring like-minded individuals together, manufacturers, supply chain partners, etc., looking to drive the adoption of the GTIN. And the idea is that the beauty about it for me is that GS1 are not for profit. So they offer their standards, and they're basically, in some sense, they have no skin in the game. They just say, "There's our standards. We provide the structure around them," and obviously they're doing this at a global level as well. It's really down to the industry to collaborate and to look at these things and to get behind it. And the more people that then start to adopt it and then drive it through a transaction, because it's not just there are already hundreds of manufacturers in the UK which have a GTIN. You can look them up now. They may have them in their database. They may even use them on a label, but the actual are they used in a transaction? Are they sort of used in anger? Is what we need to be doing. So if you take your products, do you ever push the adoption of a GTIN to your supply chain, or does your supply chain ever come to you and say, "Do you have GTINs? We would like to be able to use them"?
It's happened a couple of times in the past. I want to say 6 months or so. So we've been able to provide that information.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's a starting point.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, it's almost imperative of us to start to drive it up the supply chain instead of just wait for people to, because then we'd be in the reactive ones, aren't we?
You need a sort of top and bottom approach to these things. But even to use Sean's analogy earlier on the kind of 80-20 principle, you couldn't use that for the adoption of the GTIN, because if you were a merchant and you wanted to move to the adoption and use the GTIN, for scanning purposes and for managing stock, unless all the products that you were selling within your warehouse on your system had adopted the GTIN and had a code allocated to them, then you're not going to be able to do it. It'd be like going into a supermarket and just having 20% of the shelves which don't have a barcode.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's got to be almost a wholesale shift to saying, right, we are now going to adopt this, the industry. And because the construction is so complex, so you've got client, you've got contractor, you've got subcontractors, you've got supply chain partners, and they're separated as well. Then you've got the designers, etc., and the manufacturers. It all needs to be brought together. But it is improving, and there is work in progress on that front.
Yeah, we are providing. I mean, when you access the lookings data now, the GTIN code is in there.
Yeah,
it is.
And so that helps. But it doesn't. It just makes it easier because that GTIN is like machine readable. That's what it is. So we don't have to alter systems out there. We just need to add the data field.
Yeah. There's about 460,000 GTINs at the moment within the lookings database at the last count. So it's well on the way to being adopted. But if manufacturers stay on the fringes, if they say, "Oh, it doesn't affect us, we don't need to do it, we don't need to get involved in the adoption of that," then that potentially is going to delay the process.
Okay. And I think for me, because there's no change in systems, because obviously the TSI code still exists, it's been around for a long time, we're just adding a field. It solves the problem. So it's not, we've all got to adopt a new technology. We haven't. We've just got to add the field. Yeah. And then, like I say, 460,000, well, that's about, I don't know, it's probably about 40% of their database already.
It is well, yeah.
So, we're well on the way. So if the manufacturers can, they've probably all got back to basics. Yeah. Get the data right, get the GTIN code, add it to the other data. We'll push it in there, we'll push it straight up there, and it becomes adoptable.
And there's probably manufacturers that have already signed up to GS1 standards and maybe have some codes. They just haven't provided them to look into, or they haven't let NG15 know that they've got them. If you want to sell on Amazon, you need a GTIN. Yeah. So there are GS1 is a member-led organisation. I think they're close to 3,000 members within their construction sector. Mm-hmm. Now, some of those might be small sellers that just sell on online marketplaces, which don't really affect the construction sector as we know it. But it is all part of the mix.
There's one question I'd like to just ask each of you, which is a bit of a catch you off guard, so my apologies. But Just interested in your outlook for the construction industry, 2023. Who wants to go first?
Suzanne?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, I just think this collaboration. I think we all need to come together. I think manufacturers need to get more savvy in the way they're thinking about moving forward. I think they need to really talk to us about their data and what their plan's going to be, and let us help them to structure that.
Yep.
I think, it's starting at that base level. And even if it's a massive, if you've got a lot of data, a hell of a lot of data, it doesn't matter. Talk to us and start off small. These are bite-sized steps that you need to take. There's no rush to get to the end, and you never will get to the end, but you need to start somewhere. And I think that comes with collaboration and talking to the experts. That would be my advice.
I think from my perspective, I think we're absolute collaboration, but I think sometimes I feel there's just too many initiatives.
Right.
We've got like one place from the NMBS, we've got the Builders Merchants Federation doing ETIM, we've got DEA doing something else. There's a lot of initiatives, and they're all sort of going down. Digital product passports is another one I've heard about. And we can't do every single initiative for every single thing. So more collaboration, more talk to bring it together a little bit better. Right. Whether CCPI will do that in the future, who knows? Don't know where we are with all of that. But we that's really my take on it. We just need to sort of be a bit more collaborative, as Suzanne says.
I'm responsible.
And responsible, yeah.
Responsible for you.
I concur with all that. I think my experience of the construction industry is that, from an economic perspective, it always lags behind in terms of, because spend is typically agreed, put in place, and then the buildings are worked on, etc. So you've always got this knock-on effect in terms of the way the economy affects it, which could come later down the line. But I think that the adoption of the digital information and people to get behind, specifically for me, the unique identifier is going to make a massive difference, because what that will bring some accuracy and transparency to the whole conversation. And at the moment, I think that's what's missing.
Well, just before we wrap up then, Suzanne, Sean, NG15, where should people go to find you, find out more about the services you offer?
Okay, well, they can obviously find us from our website online, NG15, or the epim.co.uk. We also are marketing our webinars. We've got some new webinars coming up in March, and also with Lookins.
Yeah, we're doing webinars for both manufacturers, and also we've got some new ones coming along with new initiatives that we're bringing in. So they'll be starting from March, and we encourage people just come and listen. I think you attend some of them, Phil, don't you? Comes on just to listen, and I know you do. Yeah. It's just great to talk and listen.
Find us on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we're all
the time.
We're not hard to find.
We're not hard to find.
Phil, same question.
Yeah, so my the business that I've set up, Information Management Squared, is fledgling. So the website should be up and running next week. So people can find that at imsquared.co.uk. Or find me on the usual LinkedIn channels. All my details are on there. So yeah, feel free to reach out, have a conversation about see how we can help each other.
Brilliant. And as always, we hope to people listening, this was interesting, informative, insightful, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much. Thank you.